Welcome to UBI Unplugged, breaking down the future of income.
All right, everyone, let's dive right in. I've been following the recent news, and I have to say, the court ruling regarding the SRD grant is absolutely huge. It's like a seismic shift in the conversation around social support and really universal basic income.
A seismic shift? Really? I mean, it's just one court case, isn't it? And it's about regulations on an existing grant. I'm not seeing the connection to a full-blown UBI, to be honest. It just seems like a bit of a leap.
I kind of agree with Otto on that. While I acknowledge that it's a significant ruling, especially concerning the National Treasury's overreach, we have to be careful not to get carried away. Saying it paves the way for a UBI might be premature. There's a whole lot more to UBI than just easing restrictions on an existing grant.
Okay, I understand the caution, but think about what it actually represents. The court basically said that the government cannot arbitrarily exclude people from basic support when they are in need. The Pay the Grants campaign and the IEJ, they made it pretty clear that there are real people suffering, and the regulations were too restrictive. That's the very core of UBI. It's about guaranteeing a basic level of support for everyone. It's not just about tweaking existing systems. It's about establishing a fundamental right.
But a right to what exactly? Money? Where is that money just magically going to come from? And won't people just, not work? I mean, I know that's always the argument, but what would a UBI actually do for the economy apart from just creating a dependence on the state?
That's a huge concern, Otto. It's not just about handing out money, as some people might put it. It's about restructuring the entire economic system, and we haven't even started to look at the impact on inflation or how UBI might affect the cost of goods and services. And what about the people who do work, even in low-paying jobs? They would see their relative earnings fall compared to those who don't, surely? How do we address that kind of disincentive? There's a real complexity that gets overlooked.
Well, let's break that down, starting with the money. We are talking about restructuring existing social programs, not creating something entirely new from scratch. And yes, you'd have to consider things like taxes, potentially shifting towards a more progressive system. The idea isn't that no one would work. In fact, some initial data from UBI pilots suggests it may have the opposite effect. People are free to pursue education, start their own small businesses, be more creative, and engage more in their local communities. And yes, that could be a better outcome than just endless cycles of poverty and dependence on existing broken systems. And, besides, many UBI models include some kind of universal work incentive. That is, you still gain more from paid work than UBI alone.
Small businesses, really? I mean, I know that's the topic today, but how is giving everyone money going to encourage more people to go out there and start a business? Surely that's a risk, right? The vast majority of small businesses fail within the first few years. It just seems like throwing fuel on the fire to me. I can see the point that people would have more time for maybe education, but that doesn't really translate into entrepreneurs, does it?
That's a valid point, Otto. There's no guarantee that UBI would automatically translate into a thriving entrepreneurial environment. It depends on how people use the basic income, as well as other economic factors. We need to consider the kinds of support services that would need to be in place alongside UBI, access to microloans, mentoring, business training. And to be frank, what about basic infrastructure? Access to electricity and internet would have to be guaranteed. It's not enough just to hand out a basic income and expect economic transformation. We have to address systemic issues that limit access to opportunity.
Yes, and that's where the yes and comes in. It is definitely not just about handing out cash. UBI becomes a foundation, a security net from which people can actually take risks. Imagine the person who's always had a brilliant business idea but couldn't afford to leave their minimum wage job to even begin. UBI provides that breathing space, that basic security, which is crucial for experimentation and innovation. It allows them to look up from the immediate need for survival and focus on their entrepreneurial dreams. And you're right, Sarah, it has to be coupled with support services. I do see this working hand in glove with other government initiatives.
And that's exactly the point where we have to be very, very careful with the policy implementation. A poorly designed UBI could definitely lead to those kinds of negative consequences. What safeguards are in place to ensure it's not a disincentive to work? What are the checks and balances? What about regional and local variations? I mean, the cost of living in a city is wildly different from a rural area, so should the UBI amount be adjusted accordingly? This is what I mean when I say we need a really nuanced approach and not just a blanket national solution.
Absolutely, and those are really crucial details. It's not about a one-size-fits-all solution. And, again, I think pilot programs are essential for precisely this reason. They can help us understand the regional variations, fine-tune the approach based on the data gathered and real-life experience. It's about continuous improvement, not implementing something and saying, that's it. And regarding your point, Otto, about the risks, aren't we already seeing massive failures in our economic system right now? People are already at risk. But without the safety net of something like UBI, what about the risk of not trying something new?
So you are saying we need even more studies and trials. That just sounds like more bureaucracy, and while we are experimenting with UBI, things will just stay the same as they are now. You are not actually solving any problems right now.
And to be fair, Otto, the need for pilots is not exactly more bureaucracy. It's about sound policy and responsible fiscal management. You don't just implement a program of this magnitude without understanding how it works in practice. And as for UBI solving problems now, that is not how policy development works, as it can take years to move from initial idea to actual implementation. And yes, during that time, we need to find other solutions to address the real problems we face, such as food insecurity and job creation. A UBI is not meant to be a magic bullet that will fix everything overnight. It is a potential solution for a long term, and that takes a lot of time.
I agree, Sarah. It is definitely not a magic bullet. I think one of the exciting things about UBI is that it's so versatile. We're focusing on small businesses right now, but you could just as easily talk about how UBI could transform the gig economy, or empower caregivers, or boost local economies. If people have that safety net, the opportunities are endless. It's about liberating people from the shackles of basic survival and allowing them to engage fully in the economy. As for bureaucracy, it can seem like that from the outside looking in, but done correctly, policy is there to ensure systems work effectively. And we absolutely need to address the immediate needs while building that long-term system. It's not an either/or situation. We need to work on both simultaneously.
You know what I'm just a bit skeptical about is that this has all been planned and agreed upon, but it's all still theoretical, isn't it? I mean, the court case is only about one aspect of grants, so yes, the High Court says the Treasury has been overreaching, but who's to say they will now suddenly be more supportive of a full-blown UBI program? There's still a lot of political will required, and I just don't see that happening.
That's another key concern, Otto. The political landscape is a major factor. Even if the court ruling does open the door to a UBI program, there will be massive pushback. We are talking about a fundamental shift in power and resource distribution. What happens to the current system? What vested interests will be threatened? I'm sure there will be countless debates about budget and financing, but also about the very philosophy behind social welfare. I feel it would be too simplistic to think that this is some kind of simple implementation. The road ahead is complex.
Yes, and this is why education and public awareness are so critical. We need to move beyond the fear-based narratives. We need to show people what UBI actually is. It's not just about handing out free money. It's about building a more resilient and equitable society. There have been UBI pilot studies happening around the world, and they have shown positive results. It's not just a utopian dream. It's a practical solution with the potential to uplift millions of lives and create a more robust economy. I am not sure what to do about the political issues, but we have to keep the momentum going. And these small wins, like the High Court ruling, do make a difference.
Okay, but even if you convince everyone that it's a good idea and all the politicians get on board, there are practical problems, right? I mean, how do you administer such a huge system? How do you prevent fraud? How do you make sure the money gets to the right people? I can just imagine the logistical nightmare. I was reading something the other day about how Elon Musk was talking about using blockchain for government efficiency. I just thought, well, that would be interesting, but also, would it actually work? Or would it just add another level of complication?
Actually, Otto, that's not an entirely irrelevant point. Blockchain could potentially offer some innovative solutions to these challenges, especially when it comes to payment transparency and efficiency. But as you said, it's complicated. Implementing a system like that on a national scale would be a massive undertaking. I am not sure that the public blockchain infrastructure can even handle that. And of course, security would be a paramount concern. Who gets access to the data? What happens if there are breaches? The idea is intriguing, but not without its risks, and certainly not without a detailed implementation plan.
Exactly. Blockchain is just one potential tool in the toolbox. And I think that it's good we are having the conversation about alternative ways of running a modern government. We shouldn't shy away from exploring new technologies that could improve transparency and efficiency. It's not about blindly adopting whatever is new. It is about considering what works well and moving forward based on data, not emotion. The point is, there are practical issues, and we need to address them openly and honestly. And if some of the answers involve technology, then all the better. But let's not put the cart before the horse. We need to get the foundations of the policy correct before we worry about implementation.
I understand what you mean, Otto. And the truth is that there aren't going to be any easy fixes. A UBI, even if implemented, won't eradicate all poverty or solve every single economic problem. It's not a replacement for good governance, sound economic policy, and targeted social programs. It's more like an essential piece of a complex puzzle. We still need to invest in education, healthcare, infrastructure, and all the other things that make for a thriving society. And let's not forget the emotional reaction of Tom Parker's mother to his widow's pregnancy. This also shows that while we think about huge, complex social policies, we need to remember that these things also have a direct impact on individuals and human lives.
Yes, and it's that human aspect that we need to keep in mind as we discuss these things. The fact that we are talking about people's lives, their ability to provide for their families, and their basic dignity. A UBI is not just about money. It's about empowering people and creating a society where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. And I agree, the story of Tom Parker's family is a stark reminder of that. Life isn't neat and tidy. We need to take this into account when developing any kind of policy.
I just think we are focusing too much on these, big grand ideas about the future and not really on what is happening right now. Like, okay, the court case is good news for the people who are excluded, but it still doesn't solve the problem of job creation or people getting into debt. And all these conversations about UBI, blockchain, that all feels so distant. Like I say, feels like we are talking about utopia rather than real practical solutions for people in difficult situations.
But aren't the two intertwined, Otto? Addressing the immediate and planning for the future. We can't just keep patching up a broken system. We need to be thinking about how to create a system that is more just and more sustainable in the long term. UBI, while not a quick fix, could be a critical component of such a system. And it's not like the idea is just some crazy idea. It's been debated by economists, policymakers, and social reformers for many decades. There are many reasons for this, so we have to consider that history as well. We shouldn't just dismiss the possibility of implementing it, just because it sounds big and difficult.
Exactly. And it's not like we are completely ignoring the present realities. We need to work on both fronts, addressing immediate needs and building for the future. We can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? And regarding the small businesses, I really believe that UBI has the potential to truly transform how we think about entrepreneurship by giving people a safety net and an opportunity to take calculated risks. It will be interesting to see the data that comes from further UBI research and piloting, as well as the impact of the High Court ruling.
I still feel a bit uneasy about this whole thing, the lack of clear plan, the uncertainty of how it will work in practice, the potential risks of a new system. It's a lot to take on. And again, I still don't see how any of this is really solving any immediate issues. It all feels a bit pie in the sky. But okay, I will admit that the court ruling is a positive for people who are excluded. I just don't see it going much further than that.
And that's a completely valid feeling, Otto. These are complex issues, and there are no easy answers. But we should all be working on building a society that's more fair and resilient. And who knows, maybe UBI will be an important tool in that process. And there is a lot of ongoing discussion in the research field which should help further guide policy development. We have to keep an open mind and continue to challenge and discuss the details and the potential challenges, as that is the only way we can actually move forward. And just because we don't have all the answers right now, doesn't mean we shouldn't keep striving for change.
I think that is a great point. Progress comes from those debates and discussions. It is not always comfortable or easy, but if we don't keep pushing for a better way forward, then we are stuck in a system that is not working for everyone. And as we've seen in these recent court cases and pilot programs, UBI really does have the potential to change lives and economies for the better, even though there are many potential challenges to overcome. The High Court ruling is a good step in the right direction, and I hope it will encourage more discussions about UBI as a potential tool for economic empowerment.
Well, that's all we have time for today. Thank you for joining us on UBI Unplugged. We will continue the discussion next week.